If a strange interview with the devil exposed the enemy, drifting with the devil reveals the battlefield. This is the chapter where theory meets daily reality. Here, the devil's influence is not some distant shadow, but an intimate presence woven through the habits, routines, and quiet moments of ordinary lives. Drifting, I discovered, is not an accident. It is a systema, slow, subtle surrender, one tiny compromise at a time. The devil wasted no time boasting about his reach. Most people, he said, don't realize how easily they hand me the keys to their lives. It isn't the big mistakes that seal their fate. It's the dozens of tiny choices: to wait instead of act, to watch instead of build, to worry instead of hope. He described drifting as the normal condition of the modern world, so normal, in fact, that most have never questioned it. As I listened, the chilling part wasn't the devil's gloating, it was the familiarity. I saw how drifting creeps in after a long day, in the urge to scroll, to numb out, to avoid discomfort by any means necessary. The devil described his favorite traps: the television that runs until you fall asleep, the pile of someday dreams collecting dust in a drawer, the rituals of gossip, complaint, and quiet resignation. Give me a life without intention, he said, and I will turn it into a monument to mediocrity. I pressed him for details. How do you make drifting feel so natural, so inevitable? The devil smiled. I disguise it as normal life. I reward routine. I make busyness look like purpose, and comfort feel like safety. I have made the world so noisy, so fast, that silence itself now feels uncomfortable. People avoid stillness, because in the quiet they might remember what they truly want, and then I would lose them. He described drifting as a gradual process, rarely recognized in real time. No one wakes up and decides to surrender their ambition. It happens in the pauses when you say yes to one more distraction, one more shortcut, one more day of waiting for motivation. I am patient. I do not rush. Each compromise is a thread, and over years, those threads become ropes. The devil's proudest accomplishment, he claimed, was teaching generations to fear uncertainty more than mediocrity. I have convinced millions that comfort is the same as happiness, that questions are dangerous, and that dreams are best left for others. My greatest power lies in the stories people tell themselves about what is realistic, what is possible, what is good enough. The old world was built on survival. I have built the new world on resignation. Yet, as the interview continued, I began to see hope. The devil admitted, almost grudgingly, that drifting can be broken at any moment by awareness, by a question, by a single act of intention. One honest decision can snap a lifetime of habits, he said, but most people never dare to make it. They are waiting for permission from the world, from their families, even from me. I asked what advice he would give someone ready to stop drifting. The devil scoffed. Advice? I have none, only temptations. But if I must answer, I would say, start small. Notice your routines. Ask every day, is this the life I want? The act of noticing is the beginning of freedom. Most will never even begin. This conversation hit home. I realized that the true battle is fought in the small moments. The decision to turn off the noise, to write a single sentence, to choose a difficult conversation, to ask why not me, instead of why bother. Drifting is not a life sentence, but a daily decision. The devil's grip is strong, but so is the power to choose one moment, one intention, one act at a time. So, as you listen, ask yourself, where have I drifted? Where have I surrendered choice for comfort or purpose for routine? The devil may own the default settings of the world, but your life is always waiting for you to reclaim it. Ready to keep moving forward? With the devil's confession still ringing in my ears, I wanted to understand the mechanics of drifting more clearly. Explain to me, I demanded, how exactly do you turn a thinking, dreaming human being into a drifter? What are the steps, the triggers, the warning signs? The devil, with a patience born of millennia, obliged. Drifting is a process, he began, not an event. It begins with avoidance, a reluctance to face discomfort, to answer hard questions, to challenge the stories you've inherited. It starts small, a goal postponed, a difficult task delayed, a conversation avoided. Before you know it, these tiny surrenders have become the path of least resistance. He described how drifting thrives on distraction. Give a person enough options, enough noise, and they will rarely choose silence. I have filled the world with endless ways to stay busy, but rarely productive. People chase stimulation as a cure for boredom, but it only dulls their senses, numbs their ambition, and leaves them more restless than before. He took pride in turning rest into escapism, leisure into avoidance, and information into overload. The devil explained that the most dangerous stage of drifting is normalization. At first, a person feels guilt, maybe frustration, for not living up to their own standards. But in time, they stop noticing. They call it being practical, being realistic. They trade vision for comfort and purpose for predictability. Soon they can't remember the last time they took a risk, challenged an assumption, or tried something new. I pressed him. Is there a turning point, a moment when drifting becomes a trap? He nodded. Yes, when you stop questioning. The real prison is not the habits themselves, but the belief that nothing can change. Drifters begin to defend their routines, even as they resent them. They fear the unknown more than the familiar pain. Their dreams shrink until even hope seems dangerous. At this stage, I barely need to do anything. Their own mind keeps them where I want them. Curious, I asked if there was a single catalyst that could break the spell. The devil admitted, reluctantly, that awareness is always a threat to his domain. It does not take a grand gesture. One honest question, one moment of discomfort embraced can crack the armor. When a person notices they're drifting, when they allow even a flicker of curiosity, my grip begins to weaken. The challenge is to stay awake long enough to make a new choice. He described some of his favorite disguises for drifting: busyness that masquerades as productivity, pessimism dressed up as wisdom, and cynicism that passes for realism. I convince people that dreaming is for fools, that safety is the highest good, that going along is smarter than standing out. The world calls it maturity, I call it surrender. I asked about the role of the environment, though family, work, and culture reinforce drifting. The devil was quick to answer. A drifter surrounded by other drifters is unlikely to wake up. Conversation is limited to complaints, distractions, and the endless retelling of old grievances. When everyone around you accepts drifting as normal, it becomes invisible. The most dangerous prisons are the ones you can't see. And yet, he confessed, there is always hope. A single voice of challenge, a book, a mentor, a moment of clarity can start the process of awakening. The hardest part is daring to listen. By the end of this exchange, it was clear. Drifting is not a failure of willpower or intelligence. It is a gradual forgetting of purpose, 1,000 daily choices made without reflection. The antidote is not heroic action, but honest noticing and the willingness to try again and again to live by intention. So as you reflect, ask yourself, when was the last time you questioned your routines? When did you last choose discomfort over ease, curiosity over certainty, a risk over the rut? Drifting is not inevitable. Every moment offers a door, if only you are willing to open it. Determined to unearth the deepest roots of drifting, I pressed the devil for examples, real-life patterns, not just abstractions. He was all too happy to oblige. Look, he said, at the man who wakes up and checks his phone before his own thoughts, the woman who accepts a job that numbs her spirit, telling herself it's just for now, as years slip by, the student who stops asking questions, memorizing answers to pass the test, but forgetting what it means to wonder. These are not villains, they are ordinary people, drifting. He described how drifting thrives in environments that reward sameness. If you want to keep a person asleep, surround them with others who have given up on growth. Let gossip replace dreams, complaints drown out plans, and cynicism become the group's inside joke. Drifters fear standing out more than missing out. They adapt to the status quo until they can no longer remember who they were meant to become. The devil went further, exposing how drifting infects even those with ambition. High achievers are not immune. When success is defined only by money, status, or approval, even the driven can become drifter slaves to external validation, terrified of failure, always busy but never fulfilled. Their lives look impressive, but inside they're haunted by the question, is this all? He claimed drifting can be generational. Parents pass down fears as wisdom, teach risk aversion as responsibility, and model compliance as survival. Children inherit not only genes, but patterns, beliefs about what is possible, who they can be, and what they should dare. The cycle continues unless someone wakes up. Curious about that awakening, I asked, what disrupts the drift? What shakes a person out of autopilot? The devil sighed, almost wistful. It varies. Sometimes it's pain, a loss, a crisis, a disappointment too deep to ignore. Other times it's envy catching a glimpse of someone truly alive, refusing to drift and feeling the sting of possibility. And sometimes it's simply the quiet ache of boredom, the hunger for something more. He conceded that not everyone will answer this call. Drifting is comfortable until it isn't. Some will rationalize, blame, or distract themselves forever. But for those who dare to listen, even discomfort becomes a gift. It is the first sign of life returning, of purpose awakening. I asked if there was a reliable path back from drifting. The devil offered this. Begin with honesty. Admit what you've been avoiding, what you truly want, where you've settled. Then take one small step right. Call, try, question. You don't have to transform your life overnight. The first act of intention is enough to break the spell if you repeat it. He warned that old habits will fight back. Expect resistance. Your mind, your environment, even those closest to you may pull you back to the familiar, but each act of intention makes the next one easier. The devil's grip weakens every time you say, I choose. Our conversation ended on a note both sobering and hopeful. Most people will drift for years before they notice, the devil said, but awakening is always possible. You are never more than one decision away from changing everything. The tragedy is not drifting itself, but forgetting that you can always choose again. So I urge you, reflect honestly. Where are you drifting? Who benefits from your autopilot? And who might you become if you decided to live awake? Are you ready to take that first step? The devil, sensing my persistence, grew candid about the resistance people face when trying to escape drifting. Freedom is uncomfortable, he said, because it strips away your excuses. When you wake up, there's no one left to blamino system, no circumstance, not even me. That's why so few truly choose it. Drifting, for all its emptiness, offers the comfort of invisibility. You can blame the world and never have to risk anything real. He explained that the first symptom of awakening is restlessness. People often mistake this for unhappiness or dissatisfaction, but it's the soul's alarm clock. The feeling that you're meant for more, the urge to question routines, the discomfort with your own excuses, these are invitations to wake up. I asked, how does someone turn that restlessness into action rather than just more worry? The devil grinned. The secret is momentum. Start small, change your morning routine, say no to one distraction, ask a new question, take one risk. The first act of intention is the hardest, but it makes the second one possible. Your power is not in grand gestures, but in choosing again every day. He described how resistance intensifies as you begin to change. Expect the world to push back. Friends may question your motives. Family may worry you're becoming someone else. Your own mind will flood you with doubt, memories of past failures, predictions of what could go wrong. I'll do everything I can to pull you back into comfort, because comfort is my stronghold. But if you persist, something miraculous happens. Discomfort turns into energy. What once felt terrifying becomes exciting. New habits take root. The noise of drifting grows fainter. Curious about the long-term journey, I pressed for advice on sustaining change. The devil, now almost philosophical, explained, you must guard your attention. Drifting returns when you stop noticing, when you let routine replace reflection. Build rituals that remind you of your purpose. Write your intentions, share them with others, revisit them often. Celebrate small wins, forgive your slips, and above all, keep questioning. The minute you assume you're safe, I am waiting. He warned against perfectionism. Many give up because they stumble, thinking one failure means starting from zero. But awakening is not about never drifting, it's about returning again and again to intention. Every choice, no matter how small, is a vote for the life you want. We discussed the role of community. The devil reluctantly admitted, surround yourself with others who value growth. Even one ally makes awakening more likely. Conversation with the awake can shake off years of sleep. He described, with unexpected respect, the habits of those who stay free. They seek out challenge, not comfort. They make time for reflection. They value questions over answers, process over outcome. Their lives are marked by curiosity, resilience, and a willingness to begin again. As our discussion paused, I was struck by a simple truth. Drifting is not the absence of ambition, but the absence of intention. To escape the devil's grip, you do not need to become extraordinary. You need only to become honest, curious, and willing to try. So, as you move forward, ask yourself, what's one small act of intention you can make today? Who can you invite into your journey? How will you guard your attention from the noise and routines that pull you back to sleep? The devil may own the world of comfort, but your life belongs to the moments you choose to wake. With each question, the devil grew more wary, aware that his tricks were being dragged into the light. Let's talk about relapse, I insisted. Even those who awaken sometimes fall back into drifting. Why does this happen, and how can someone recover? He nodded, almost approving. Relapse is my oldest ally. Human beings are creatures of habit. No matter how powerful an awakening, the pull of the familiar is always strong. Old routines are easy, comforting. They ask little and promise much. The mind, seeking relief from effort or uncertainty, slips back into autopilot. I have seen many brave souls taste freedom only to drift again at the first sign of fatigue, failure, or frustration. The devil explained that relapse is often accompanied by shame. People judge themselves harshly, believing that a single slip erases all progress. Shame becomes a cage within a cage trap that keeps them from trying again. The voice in their head sometimes sounding suspiciously like mine says, "Why bother? You always end up here." The tragedy is not in drifting, but in believing you cannot return. He outlined the keys to recovery. First, forgive yourself quickly. Every journey has setbacks, every path curves. The real test is not in avoiding mistakes, but in refusing to let them define you. Begin again, without drama. Small steps, repeated with intention. Rebuild the muscle of choice. I asked about strategies for resilience. The devil listed several. Rituals that remind you of your purpose morning routines, journaling, walks in solitude, conversations with trusted friends. Celebrate small victories. Reflect often, but do not dwell. If you stumble, let curiosity replace judgment. What triggered this drift? What can I change next time? Awareness, not punishment, is your greatest tool. He described the value of self-compassion. The ones I fear most are not those who never fail, but those who quickly forgive themselves and get back up. They do not make an identity out of drifting, nor out of perfection. Their story is always, "I choose again." We spoke about support. The devil conceded. Find allies, people who remind you of who you want to be. Even one honest friend can make relapse less frequent and recovery faster. If your environment celebrates intention, you are more likely to stay awake. He warned of two final pitfalls. Beware the illusion of arrival, the belief that awakening is a one-time event. Drifting returns the minute you stop paying attention. And beware of cynicism, the belief that lasting change is impossible. Cynicism is my armor. It keeps people stuck in stories about how nothing really matters. By the end of our conversation, the cycle was clear. Drifting, awakening, relapse, return. The difference between those lost and those free is not a life without slips, but a life filled with conscious returns. Every act of intention, however small, is a rebellion against the devil's rule. So, as you reach this point, remember, the journey is not linear. It is a spiral, with each turn taking you deeper into awareness. The real triumph is not in never drifting, but in never giving up your power to choose again. Ask yourself, when you falter, how quickly do you return? Whose voice do you listen to, shame's or your own? The devil waits for you to surrender. But your freedom is built, one awakening at a time, on your refusal to drift for long. By now, the devil's confidence had cooled, replaced with a wary respect for the power of persistence. I wanted to bring the conversation into the realm of the everyday where drifting is born, resisted, and ultimately defeated. Let's talk about practice, I said. What does it actually look like to live awake, day after day? How does someone keep from falling back under your spell? The devil leaned in, his tone almost conspiratorial. Awareness is a discipline, not a mood. It begins each morning before the world's noise invades. The ones who escape me start their day with intention, sometimes with meditation, sometimes with a written goal, sometimes with a silent promise. Today, I will choose. This small ritual draws a line between drift and design. He explained that throughout the day, temptation is constant. I whisper, just this once check your phone, skip your plan, delay the difficult thing. The awake do not resist me with sheer willpower. They outmaneuver me with strategy. They use cues and reminders, notes on the mirror, alarms on the phone, meetings with people who hold them accountable. They build an environment where purpose is hard to forget. I asked, what about when things go wrong, when plans fail, energy flags, or the world delivers one of its inevitable surprises? The devil smiled, acknowledging his favorite weapons, fatigue and overwhelm. This is where drifting reclaims most people. The awake anticipate setbacks. They do not curse themselves for feeling tired or discouraged. They see these as signals, not sentences. They rest, recalibrate, and crucially, they ask for help when needed. Isolation is my fortress. Connection is my undoing. He described how daily review can be a lifeline. In the quiet at day's end, the awake ask, did I drift today? Where did I choose? And where did I coast? This reflection is not for blame, but for learning. Each night they recommit. The power of awakening is not that you never falter, but that you notice sooner and return faster. The devil was forced to admit that meaning is the ultimate shield. Those who know why they act are hardest to sway. Purpose fuels resilience, especially when outcomes are slow or invisible. If you lose sight of your why, my job becomes easy distraction and disappointment do the rest. We discussed how, over time, these practices become identity. The awake, the devil's side, are not just people with good habits. They become the kind of person who wakes up, questions, starts again. Their identity is rooted in curiosity and growth. They see each day as a new experiment, not a test to pass. He warned, however, that there is no finish line. I am patient. I wait for arrogance, for complacency, for the day someone believes they are immune to drifting. That is when I begin again. As long as you live, the choice remains. Drift or decide. Our dialogue closed with a simple truth. The real battle is not for perfection, but for participation. Every morning offers a new chance to wake, to choose, to reclaim authorship of your life. So, I ask you, how will you design your day? What will you remind yourself of when fatigue sets in? Who will you trust to pull you back when you begin to drift? The devil's power is not in some distant threat, but in today's smallest choices, but so is your freedom. By this stage, it became clear that the devil's reign is built on a subtle avoidance of responsibility. I asked, if drifting is so pervasive, is there a deeper reason so many choose it, even after they know what's happening? The devil's reply cut to the heart of human nature. Most people want freedom without the burden of choice. Drifting is easy because it relieves you of responsibility. You can blame fate, circumstances, or even me. True awakening means accepting not just the power to choose, but the weight of every choice. He elaborated on how modern life is designed to seduce us back into unconsciousness. You are surrounded by offers of ease, autopay, autoplay, auto everything. The promise is always, let us think for you. Drifting has never been easier. The awake must resist a culture that idolizes convenience over consciousness. We talked about the courage required to break the trance. It takes honesty, the devil said, the kind that is uncomfortable, even painful. The awake admit not only where they have drifted, but where they still do. They question their motives, their loyalties, even their own stories about the past. Growth is not for the faint of heart. I pressed him. What does maturity really look like for the non-drifter? The devil's answer was surprising. True maturity is the willingness to live without guarantees. It is to act, not for approval or certainty, but for the sake of the act itself. Non-drifters seek progress, not perfection. They measure growth by honesty and resilience, not by applause. He explained that the mature rarely see themselves as finished. They keep learning. They ask for help. They admit when they are lost or afraid. The mark of the awake is not that they always know, but that they are always willing to find out. He was quick to warn that success brings its own dangers. Complacency is my best disguise. Once a person tastes progress, they may settle resting on old victories, repeating old answers. The mature know that every day is a new test, and yesterday's insight cannot save today's intention. We discussed relationships. The devil conceded. The awake build partnerships based on honesty, not convenience. They challenge each other, celebrate growth, and refuse to collude in drifting. A true friend will ask you the question you're avoiding and stay with you through the discomfort of answering. He described the spiritual dimension of awakening. Non-drifters are not immune to doubt or fear, but they see them as teachers, not enemies. They treat life as a process, not a problem to be solved once and for all. Their hope is not in control, but in participation, showing up, again and again, for themselves and for others. As the interview closed in on its final lessons, the devil sighed. You can drift for years and wake in a moment, or you can wake for years and drift in a heartbeat. The difference is vigilance returning, again and again, to the question, am I living by design or by default? So as you listen, ask yourself, where have you sought freedom without responsibility? What uncomfortable truth are you willing to face? How might honesty, more than heroism, be the beginning of your real awakening? The devil's last illusions were crumbling, but the deepest challenges were still to come. As our conversation entered its final rounds, the devil's tone changed from smug certainty to wary respect. He seemed to sense that the secret to outwitting him was not heroic willpower, but something far quieter, ownership. Tell me then, I challenged, if the real freedom from drifting is so ordinary, why do so few people embrace it? The devil gave a long, reflective answer. Because ownership is uncomfortable. It means you stop blaming your upbringing, your circumstances, your failure, even me. It means you stop searching for the right moment and start acting in this one. Most would rather believe their lives are shaped by forces beyond their control, because that belief lets them off the hook. True freedom is not about control, but about authorship, the courage to write your story, even when you're unsure how it ends. He described the final barrier to awakening, the willingness to be misunderstood. To leave drifting, you must be willing to stand out. You may be called naive, stubborn, or even reckless for refusing to settle. You may lose approval, or even relationships that depended on your drifting. But each time you choose truth over comfort, clarity over consensus, you grow stronger and my grip weakens. We explored how the awake build resilience. They stop measuring progress by perfection and start by participation. They treat each setback as feedback, not failure. They keep showing up, not because they expect an easy path, but because they know the only alternative is to drift. They accept that being awake is not always fun or easy, but it is always real. The devil warned that the old world never stops calling. I will tempt you with old comforts, the nostalgia of routine, the promise that you can have freedom without cost. But every time you answer with intention, with ownership, with the willingness to begin again, you step further out of my reach. He described, with some frustration, how even the smallest act of authorship can unravel years of drifting. When a person admits, this is my life, my choice, my responsibility, I am left with nothing to bargain. Even if they fail 100 times, the habit of ownership is my undoing. As we prepared to close the interview, I asked, what's the one thing you hope people never realize? The devil was honest. That ordinary courage, repeated, is stronger than any trap I can set. That you don't need to have all the answers, you only need to choose again, each day, to live awake. The final lesson was clear. Drifting is not the villain. Avoiding the discomfort of ownership is. The call is not to heroics, but to humble, daily participation in your own life. So, as you reach the end of this journey, ask yourself, what is one thing today you can claim as your own? Where can you accept authorship, not as a burden but as a privilege? The devil's final mask was slipping. One more conversation remained, the last invitation to awaken, choose, and begin again. As our dialogue reached its climax, I felt the weight of every admission, every strategy, every subtle manipulation the devil had revealed. The room felt charged not with fear, but with a new sense of possibility. I looked him in the eye, determined to draw out his last, most honest confession. If drifting can be broken by ownership, I pressed, then what keeps people from stepping fully into that role? Why do even the awakened sometimes hesitate to claim authorship of their own lives? The devil did not hesitate, because ownership is a living, breathing practice, not a one-time decision. Most people are willing to take responsibility for their successes, but shrink from their mistakes, their failures, their mess. They want the glory without the grit. The real freedom is found when you accept the whole story yours with all its imperfections. He spoke of the courage required to keep choosing. You cannot outrun fear, nor can you erase the past, but you can step forward again and again, even when your confidence falters. Ownership means letting go of blame off parents, partners, luck, even fate, and meeting yourself exactly where you are. That is the moment my influence crumbles. No matter how strong the drift, a single act of honesty resets the journey. We discussed the idea of legacy. The devil explained, "The greatest danger to my work is not in grand speeches or perfect lives, but in the quiet, persistent example of someone who chooses to live awake day after day. Their presence gives others permission to wake, to try, to believe that a different life is possible. That's how the old world is changed, one honest choice, multiplied by many." I asked about the temptation to return to drifting, especially when life is hard. The devil was blunt. "You will always be tempted. There will always be days when routine feels safer than risk, when failure seems final, when hope feels naive. My work is to exploit those moments to whisper that it's too late, that comfort is all there is. But I can never force you. Your choice remains, always." He shared, almost reluctantly, a final truth. "My power is greatest in silence, secrecy, and shame. The moment you speak, act, or reach out for support, my hold is broken. The smallest act of connection, a conversation, a question, a cry for help is more dangerous to me than any solitary vow." As the conversation drew to a close, I felt the shape of a new world emerging, a world where drifting is no longer the default, but a challenge to be met with curiosity and resolve, where freedom is not a prize, but a practice, where the devil, for all his cleverness, is nothing more than a shadow, dispelled by the light of ownership and honest participation. So, as you prepare to move forward, ask yourself, what will you claim as your legacy? Where will you risk honesty, responsibility, and the privilege of authorship? The devil will always invite you to drift, but your power today, and every day, is to choose again. One last invitation remained. The interview, and your story, was ready for its closing note. The end of this chapter was not marked by fanfare, but by a kind of sacred quiet, the moment when truth finally settles in. The devil, stripped of his disguises, made his final appeal. "You can drift as long as you like. The world is full of comforts, distractions, and stories to lull you back to sleep. But every day, you have the power to choose. That is the secret I most wish you would forget." He admitted, with a rare note of humility, that drifting is not a sentence, but a habit. You are not doomed by your routines or your past. Each moment you notice, each time you interrupt the script, you chip away at my influence. You do not have to rebuild your life in a day. You only have to wake up right now, in this breath, in this choice. The devil described how most people search for the dramatic transformation, the big moment, the lightning bolt of change. But the greatest awakenings come quietly through a conversation that stirs you, a question that won't let go, a morning when you dare to act on your own behalf. The door out of drifting is always unlocked, but you must decide to walk through. He spoke almost wistfully of the power of persistence. You may fall asleep again, you may lose your way. But as long as you return again and again to ownership, intention, and connection, you outwit me. The only real defeat is surrender. As long as you participate, as long as you wake and choose, you remain beyond my reach. With the devil's last words hanging in the air, the lesson was clear. The real danger is not in making mistakes, but in refusing to begin again. Not in drifting, but in denying yourself the right to return. Freedom is not a single act, but a series of awakenings, a practice of noticing, choosing, and engaging with your own life. As the interview closed, I felt less afraid of the devil than ever before. I saw finally that his power was rooted in my willingness to give it away. Each honest decision, each act of ownership, each return from drifting was an act of liberation. The world might never stop tempting you to sleepwalk through your days, but your story, your voice, and your freedom are always yours to reclaim. So, I invite you, listener, to claim your own awakening. Let the devil's tricks inspire you to practice presence, to question, to risk, and to build again and again. The interview is over, but your practice has just begun. The world will offer comfort, but you alone can choose freedom.